Patricia is very good at speaking in a perfect American accent. I am very good at speaking in a Swedish accent. Perfect Swedish accent. Because a long time ago, or maybe it wasn't such a long time ago, there was a husband and his wife. They lived together in a yellow cottage. And on the front of that cottage, there was a veranda. And that veranda was covered with blue wisteria that had the most beautiful scent. And the two of them loved each other very much. Not only that, they loved each other's company. So they did everything together. They were looking after their fields together, they kept the house, and they had a vegetable garden where they grew all of their food. And in that garden there was a flower border with yellow and crimson flowers. Now that was the task of the husband, to look after that border of flowers. And he used to do that in the afternoons while his wife was in the house preparing for the evening meal. And as he was working there, he used to sing a song. It was a lullaby that he had learned when he was a boy. Hush, hush, don't be afraid. Hush, hush, the stars will guide and protect you. Hush, hush, don't be afraid, my sweet, sweet one. And every time he sang that, the song floated in through the door into the kitchen to his wife. And it went straight into her heart, and she felt so safe, so comforted when she heard that song. And later in the evenings, when all the work was done, the two of them used to go out and sit on that veranda, close to each other. And they used to talk about what had happened during the day, all the work they had done together, what they were going to do tomorrow. And they looked how the sun was setting before they went to bed in each other's arms. But one day, war broke out in that country. And that was a sad day for both of them, because the husband was called up to the army. He had to go and fight in the war. His wife had to look after the farm and the garden and the house all by herself. And on the battlefields, the husband saw awful things. He saw things that he didn't think it was possible for human beings to do to each other. But one day, the war was over. And the wife, she was waiting for him to return. Every day she walked out on that veranda and she looked down the road to see if he was coming. She didn't walk out once, not twice. She walked out several days, but he never came. She waited a whole week. He didn't come. She waited 2 weeks. He did not arrive. She waited a whole month. And then she started to despair. Will I ever see him again? Maybe he's not coming back. Maybe he was killed in that war. Imagine if I will have to live alone for the rest of my days. But then one day, when she had been to market, and she came home and she approached the house, she saw that somebody was sitting in the chair there on the veranda. Could it be? Could it be? Yes, yes, it was him. And she dropped her bag for shopping and she rushed up on the veranda and she embraced him. And she gave him a kiss. But he didn't answer. His hands were hanging limply. He stared right beside her. It was hard. But she started to fuss around him. She told him everything that had happened during the time he had been away. And she started to prepare a meal for him, his favorite meal, shepherd's pie with vegetables from their own garden. She laid the table with the best white tablecloths. She took out the finest cutlery and crockery, and from the cupboard came that bottle of wine that she had saved for this moment. And when the meal was ready, she called him in from the veranda, and they sat down together. But he barely touched the food. And he didn't stay long there. He stood up again and he walked out and sat on that veranda and stared down the road. And when it was bedtime, she made the bed with a fresh, clean sheet. She called him into bed. And she lay down next to him, she embraced him, and she showered him with kisses. But he just lay there. And soon he turned his back towards her and stared into the wall. And so it went on day after day. She was working, he was sitting out on the veranda. And every evening she thought, tomorrow we are going to talk again. Tomorrow it's going to be like it always was. But it never happened. And one day she lost her temper with him. Here I am. I've done all the work while you've been away, and now you come back. You do nothing. You just sit there. You don't even talk to me. What is the matter with you? I know. But when she finished being angry, she started to get worried about him. So she walked to the doctor and asked for his advice, but he didn't know what to do. She asked all her friends. They didn't know what to do. But then she remembered. There was the wise woman who lived on the edge of the forest. She would go and see her. So one morning she prepared food for her husband, did all her chores, and said goodbye to him. He just nodded. But if she had looked carefully, she could have seen that there was a faint smile of hope on his face. And when she arrived at the wise woman's cottage, she entered. And there she was sitting in front of a table. It was full of thick, old, dusty books. And on the shelf there were jars of potions and jars of herbs. And the wise woman was sitting there with grey hair tied back in a knot. She had a wrinkly, mild face and soft blue eyes. Welcome, my dear. What is it that is troubling you? Sit down and tell me. I want to hear all about it. Well, it is my husband. He's come home and he doesn't work, he doesn't do anything. He doesn't eat my food. And I'm afraid he doesn't love me anymore. Well, there is a potion for your husband that would help you. But I haven't got all the ingredients for it. You will have to get the last one for me. Oh yes, of course, I'll get it. I'll get anything. I'll do anything. Good. What I need from you is the whisker of that mighty tiger that lives in the cave on top of the mountain. That is what I need. The whisker of the mighty tiger. Anything but that. The woman had heard everything about the mighty tiger. Many people had gone up to find him. Nobody had returned. And the whole village was full of stories of the piles of white bones that was laying outside his cave. No, that she could not do. But then she saw that wise woman across the table with her mild face, her soft blue eyes looking at her steady. And she realized, I have to do it. And I can do it. And I will do it. So on the way home, she made a plan. And next morning, she got up early. She went to the market. She bought a big piece of meat. She wrapped that in paper, tied string around it. And then she started to walk up that mountain pass towards the cave where the tiger lived. She was so frightened, her legs shook with each step she took. And when she got up halfway that pass, she stopped. And then she unwrapped the meat and she put it down on the pass. And then she started to sing. Hush, hush, don't be afraid. Hush, hush, the stars will guide and protect you. Hush, hush, don't be afraid, my sweet, sweet one. She sang it to still her own fears, but she also sang it for that mighty power on top of the mountain. And then she walked down again, but she didn't walk further down than she could still see the piece of meat in the past. And then she waited. And she didn't have to wait all that long before she could feel, rather than see, that mighty power coming down the mountainside. And at last he came round the bend, walking slowly, his muscles rippling under that stripy fur. He walked all the way down to the piece of meat. And there he stopped, sniffed in the air. He looked down at the woman. Then he circled the piece of meat once, and he circled it twice. And then he stopped again, sniffed the air, looked at the woman, picked up the piece of meat, and disappeared up the mountainside. Next day, the woman did the same thing. She brought a piece of meat, and she walked up the mountain pass. But this time she walked a little bit further, up round the next bend, and there she unwrapped the meat, put it down on the pass. Hush, hush, don't be afraid. Hush, hush, the stars will guide and protect you. And then she walked down and waited. It didn't take long before the tiger came down, sniffed in the air, looked at her, circled the meat once, twice, sniffed the air again, looked at her, picked up the meat, disappeared up the south mountainside. And in this way started a daily, frightening routine for the woman. Every day she took a piece of meat up that mountain, and every day she walked a little bit further up the hillside, and every day she stopped a bit closer to the piece of meat, until one day she came round the last bend, and she stood right outside the cave of the tiger. And she put the piece of meat down. Then she went to sit down next to it. She didn't have to wait long before the tiger came out. He looked at her. He looked at the piece of meat. All the time she was singing to the tiger. She was singing about what she needed for her husband. The tiger looked at her as if he was in agreement. And then he lay down on the ground and started to eat the meat. When it was finished, he closed his eyes and put his head down to sleep. The woman was sitting next to him. She stretched out her hand, took hold of a whisker. Nothing happened. Then she pulled. Still nothing happened. But she had the whisker in her hand. And she stood up and she thanked the tiger graciously. And then she ran down the mountainside. And she did not stop until she came to the cottage of the wise woman. She didn't even knock on the door this time. She burst in. Look, I've got the whisker. I've got the whisker. Here it is. And the wise woman, she took it. She didn't even look at it. She just flung it into the fire. Psst, it's gone. What are you doing? Now there's no help for my husband. The whisker is gone. Do you know how long it has taken me to get it? Do you know how frightened I have been? And she started to lunge out at the wise woman, and she told her all the words under the sun that she could think of. But the wise woman, she was just sitting there with a mild face, soft eyes. And once the wife had stopped talking, she looked at her. There is no potion for your husband, but there is hope, and you are the hope. You must understand that your husband is deeply, deeply wounded from what he has seen in the war, and only your love can heal him. So just as you approached the tiger with courage, patience, and love, so must you approach your husband. And when the wife looked into the eyes of the wise woman, she knew what to do. So she walked home again. And at home she did her work just like she'd always done. But she didn't demand anything from him. She was always around him. And she made sure that now and again she would not be more busy than she could sit down next to him and just be with him. And in the evenings, she went out to sit with him on the veranda like they always had done, watching the sun setting, not talking. And slowly, slowly, a strong, deep bond of love grew up between them. And one day, when she came home from market and looked up on the veranda, his chair was empty. And she got worried. Where can he be? Has he gone away somewhere? She rushed into the house to see if he was there. He wasn't there either. But then she looked to the door out to the garden. It stood ajar. And she opened the door and went out. And there he stood, right in the middle of that flower bed of crimson and yellow flowers. They had got a bit weedy by now. But he held in his hand the bud of a new red flower. First he didn't notice her, but as she came closer to him, he said, "Isn't it beautiful?" And for a long time they stood together there without saying anything, just looking at the beautiful world around them. And after a while he stretched out his hand, and she took it. And together they walked in from the garden, through the house, and out on the veranda. And there they sat down together, close to each other, not saying very much, but looking out at the beautiful sun setting, and a new, strong, deep bond of love had grown up between them.